Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edges of extinction. We'll share species research information and conservation proposals, and then we'll spend part of the show opening and holding a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a soundscape of gentleness, of reflection, and maybe of grieving. There's a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century. So perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the Bonaire Palm. The Bonaire palm is a critically endangered palm native to the island of Bonaire in the southern Caribbean Sea. The Bonaire palm is a recently described species, meaning that it was formally identified and thoroughly documented and given an agreed-upon place in our scientific taxonomy of life just in 2021. Scientists use words like describe or classify in regard to new species, in part to avoid language like unknown or discovered, because of course the Bonaire palm wasn't unknown. The palm has existed on Bonaire for a long time. Indigenous locals have a name for it. It's part of the landscape and the ecosystem. And so instead we say described to mean that researchers now have studied the species closely enough to determine that it is distinct from other species. And so in the case of the Bonaire palm, recent genetic analysis confirmed the distinction between it and its closest relative, Sabal antillensis. Researchers observed a unique genetic profile in the Bonaire palm, indicating a distinct evolutionary lineage. Mature Bonaire palm can reach heights of up to 23 feet, with a crown of dense, stiff, spiky, fan-shaped leaves that shoot outward in all directions. Its trunk is roughly a foot in diameter, with bark that is grayish-tan in color and generally smooth, though marked by persistent raised leaf scars. So these are marks, these are like kind of notches left on the trunk where old leaves have fallen off. As palm trees grow, they produce new leaves at the top of their trunk, and older leaves below die and fall off. This process, called abscission, results in visible scarring on the Bonaire Palm's trunk. Abscission basically means shedding. And I'd like to spend a brief moment unpacking this idea, as it is like a key, widespread adaptation observed across all kinds of life on our planet. A dramatic example are lizards, like some gecko and skink, that can shed their tail to escape predators. Or the Arctic hare, who sheds its white winter coat in the springtime, growing a brownish tan coat to replace it, a new camouflage for after the snowmelt. Or when the cherry blossom sheds its unpollinated flowers to preserve and redirect nutrients to new growing fruit. It is autumn where I live in the Northern Hemisphere, and we're experiencing a kind of seasonal defining abscission, the leaf fall from deciduous trees. In plants, the abscission process goes roughly like this. First, resorption, in which the plant breaks down chlorophyll and pulls in any remaining nutrients from the leaves. Chlorophyll is green, and its breakdown and absorption result in the changing leaf color. And so, following resorption, the plant begins to form a durable, waterproof, protective cellular layer between the leaf stem and the branch or trunk. And then detachment. The leaf falls off. In the case of the Bonaire Palm, which is an evergreen, when new leaf growth above blocks light from the leaves below, it reduces their photosynthetic efficiency, and then the abscission process begins. So chlorophyll breaks down, and we'll see lower leaves on the palm yellow and brown, and eventually detach and fall off, revealing that new protective cellular layer where the leaf met to the trunk. And so, bringing this all the way back around, that layer is the leaf scars that pock the trunk's bark as it grows. In the dream, another story from the Buddha. In the dream, two monks quietly walk the countryside on their way to the cherry blossom festival until they reach a flooded river. In the dream, the bridge is destroyed, washed out, presumably in the recent rains. The younger monk tests the water and finds its temperature and its current manageable, though the monks will surely be soaked up to their chests. Nevertheless, they are about to proceed across when two princes call out to them. The princes call out to them using, frankly, demeaning and rude language that I would prefer not to repeat here. They call out, demanding to be carried across the river, that their fine clothing and gregarious temperament would be spoiled by the river water, and that the monks' plain robes and low station could not possibly be further impoverished. The princes laugh with each other at this slight, like many a powerful man who mistakes his meanness for humor. And yet these monks, hold their vows sacred. Life is suffering and what have you, and they have dedicated their lives to service. And so they oblige, hoisting the princes onto their shoulder and trudging the river. The whole traverse fielding complaint from the princes and the occasional, though surely intentional, royal foot rubbed against cheek or mouth. And then safely across, the monks deposit the princes and resume their journey, receiving, of course, neither coin nor thanks. As they walk, their robes drying in the noon sun, the elder monk muttered under his breath, how rude those men, their presumption, their ingratitude. It's continued for many miles, each footfall a new grumbled grievance. Eventually the young monk turned to the older monk, softly parting his dark cloud, and said, "My friend, you must be weary. I set my prince down back at the riverbed, but you, all these miles later, are still carrying yours." May we all set down our grievance and walk toward blossoming in the dream. Bonaire Palm produces flower clusters, inflorescences, of small white flowers that emerge from within its crown of leaves. I could not find definitive information about Bonaire Palm pollination, but we can hypothesize, based on what we know about other palms in the Sabal genus, that it's likely insect pollinated by bees, beetles, flies. And then after successful pollination, the Bonaire palm's flowers develop into small, black, fleshy fruits, each containing a single seed. Again, we don't have detailed research on seed distribution, but the fruit is likely dispersed by animals that consume them, spreading the seeds throughout their habitat in their excrement. The Bonaire palm is native to the island of Bonaire in the southern Caribbean Sea, about 50 miles from the northern coast of Venezuela. The island is relatively small, roughly 110 square miles, approximately the same size as Brooklyn, where I live. The Bonaire palm's current population is concentrated in a roughly 1 square mile area in the southern part of the island, west of Loch Bay and north of the Cargill Salt Flats. This is a low-lying limestone scrubland, just 15 feet above sea level. It is an arid, sun-drenched landscape. The terrain is relatively flat, and the soil is thin and poor in nutrients. This is the Aruba Curacao Bonaire Cactus Scrub ecoregion. It is hot and dry, with summer highs reaching into the 90s and winter lows rarely dipping below the 70s. Rain is scarce, averaging about 20 inches per year, and often concentrated in short, intense bursts from December to March. The Bonaire Palm shares this dry habitat with Bonaire Laura, southern yellowbat, organ pipe cactus, green iguana, Bonaire whiptail, speckled tegu, Bonaire barn owl, turnip-tailed gecko, hedgehog cactus, acacia tree, brown-throated parakeet, jumping ground bug, yellow-shouldered Amazon parrot, Bonaire anole, Bonaire green parrot, flamingo, queen of the night cactus, candy-striped hermit crab, and many, many more. Historically, habitat loss due to human development has significantly reduced the Bonaire palm population. In the 20th century, agriculture and construction reduced the palm's viable available habitat, and now in the 21st century, increasing tourism is perpetuating this threat. Additionally, non-native, human-introduced, domesticated, and previously domesticated, now feral livestock, like goats and donkeys, overgraze the land. This overgrazing prevents the successful establishment of new young palm seedlings and stresses the palm's habitat in general. Human-induced climate change is an imminent threat, with global warming resulting in changing weather patterns, increased wildfires, drought, and the potential for sea level rise, which is forecasted in this region to rise by at least 5 feet in the next 70 years. On-site conservation efforts have commenced, beginning with the construction of an exclusion fence to protect part of the Bonaire palm habitat from this overgrazing by the roaming goats and donkeys. A recent spring 2024 report observes noticeable increase in new seedlings within this fenced area. Offsite efforts include the successful recruitment of seedlings and of seed banking at the Terra Barra Native Garden on Bonaire and at the Montgomery Botanical Center in Coral Gables, Florida. Nevertheless, the Bonaire palm has been considered critically endangered on the IUCN Red List since 2021, and their population is considered in decline. Our most recent counts estimate that less than 25 Bonaire palm remain in the wild. Information for today's show about the Bonaire Palm was compiled from the Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance BioNews, May 2024, from the Encyclopedia of Earth, from the International Journal of Plant Sciences, Volume 182, Number 4, from Conservation Genetics, Volume 25, from the IUCN, from Phytotaxa, Volume 120, Number 2, from Palms, Volume 63, Number 2, and from Stinapa Bonaire. And so in a moment, I would like to perform some music in hopes of opening a space to be in contemplation of the other lives with whom we share our earth. This music isn't for the Bonaire Palm. I don't want to think of the palm as a vessel from which I extract meaning or put meaning upon. Instead, this music is intended to express my awe, my very human awe, and have it be a moment, a held pause to consider my own relationship to our planet and other life. And so I will sit and create the space of sound, and awe, and contemplation, and I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the Bonaire Palm. I commit to carrying its human name in my record. And I am grateful to have shared time on our planet with this remarkable being. I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. And so, in the name of the Bonaire Palm, I pledge to reduce my consumption, my carbon footprint, and curb my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of plant and animal kin or their habitat by individuals, corporations, and governments. I pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bad at Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin. Goodbye.